can see the time, so that's from usually bring it in a joke.
So I just, that's it. Ring the bell, settle everybody in. Yep. So I don't say, shut up, everybody. No, that would be wrong. Uh-huh. Good morning. Good morning. Let us settle into our time of worship with the music of spirit sound. You are also invited to light a silent candle of joy or sorrow at this time. Welcome. My name is Karen Stevenson, an active member of this congregation.
I am of the Great Spirit. It is so. And this is called the Cherokee Morning.
Hello? Perfect. Our trail sliding words today are I love powwow. Beautiful Saturday morning, gonna have breakfast on the go. We're hitting the powwow trail. Got 49 miles of road, regalia, feathers, and drum packed gently. Can't wait for the MC to call grand entry. To see family and friends will be a delightful sight, and that gorgeous jingle dress she finished sewing last night. The sound of the drums, heartbeat of Mother Earth. Dancers move in a circle, connecting with their birth, dancing for the spirits as we move to the beat. Touching Mother Earth, we play with our feet. Honoring the four-legged and wings, their strength that we so admire. Our movements tell a story as we go around the sacred fire. The drummers keep the rhythm of the ancient voices of long ago, connecting with earth and sky. The eagle whistle blows. Every dancer is in the circle as we dance into the night. Colorful beads, shells, and feathers seem to be taking flight. The scent of sweetgrass and sage softly blesses the lands. Crafters and cooks and vendors serving laughter by their stands. I love the powwow. It's unity, love, and respect, so please come join us if you have not been here yet. By Larry Spotted Crow Mann, Womack tribal member, author, and poet.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester's Sunday morning worship service. We are glad that you have joined us this morning. We hope that this service gives you an opportunity to pause for a few minutes to gather in community so that we might care for each other. Take a moment to reflect on our own well-being and discover opportunities for spiritual refreshment and service in the wider world. Large print hymnals and orders of service are located in the foyer, as well as hearing devices and pew cushions for those who would find any of these things helpful. Please see one of our ushers or greeters for help locating any of these. For those of you joining online, for safety purposes and so that we might come to know you better as you are able, please list your name on your video feed. Please note that this service is being live streamed on Zoom and Facebook, as well as being recorded for future availability on the church YouTube channel and our website worship archive. Closed captioning is available for those on Facebook. We extend a very special welcome to newcomers this morning and invite you all to fill out one of the cards found in the pews. You are welcome to drop the card in the offering plate or leave it on one of the boxes here in the sanctuary, Fellowship Hall, or in the sanctuary foyer on the door. Due to the pandemic, we are foregoing the collection of children's change for change in person. However, there is a basket next to the Joys and Sorrows candle bowl for those who would like to contribute change to assist with the church emergency fund this morning. Following the service this morning, you were invited to join us for a time of fellowship under the tent out front following the service. It is Soup Sunday today. Once again, welcome and thank you for joining this morning. Oh, okay, so maybe it's not Soup Sunday, since it was Soup Sunday last Monday. Okay. I acknowledge that in Worcester, Massachusetts, we work, learn, live, and worship on the seized ancestral homeland of the Nipmuc people who survive and remain active as the Nipmuc Nation.
The following is a reading from Invisible Indians by David R. Baragi, a mixed-blood Muskogee Seminole who is enrolled with the Muskogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma. The 2000 United States Census counted a record 4.1 million people who listed themselves as American Indian or Alaskan Native, over twice as many as the 1990 census. Part of this increase is due to a major effort launched by the federal and tribal officials to count enrolled tribal members in geographically isolated reservation households that had previously been missed. Other factors, not all of them beneficial to the Native American community, have also led to an increase in the number of Americans claiming Native ancestry. The growing Indian casino industry has lured many opportunists to seek tribal enrollment, despite having no interest in tribal society or, in fraudulent cases, no active Native ancestry. In addition, the New Age movement has popularized watered-down forms of indigenous religious practices, making it fashionable for spiritually impoverished European Americans to boast of having an Indian medicine man or woman somewhere in the family tree. Another reason that probably accounts for most of the increase in numbers, for the first time in the country's history, the federal census allowed people to list themselves as belonging to more than one race. Prior to 2000, it required that individuals of mixed ancestry list themselves as belonging to one race only, consigning the rest of their racial heritage to official oblivion.
COVID's not gone, folks. We are wiping down the microphones between people so that we can keep each other safe. Please open your teal hymnal to 1012. We will sing When I Am Frightened. Rise as you are willing and able. The poem that Maddie, who a veteran of campus ministry who was visiting us today, read this morning was called I Love Powwow. And it's unfortunate the microphone wasn't working well enough for us to hear it. It's a celebration of the joy of going to powwow and experiencing being an Indian, experiencing family, being with others that are like themselves, and it ends with an invitation for all of us to join them. This was written by Nipmuc Indian David R. Bragi, who is a mixed blood, he's a citizen of the Nipmuc tribe, which is the tribe that was on the land that we now work, live, and breathe on. Their land was not given to them, it was theirs, and we took it. I speak as a white person and as part of the group that did that. Our next reading is called Howling at the Moon by Craig Womack, a Creek, Cherokee, Irish, and German mixed blood. Craig Womack is a professor in Nebraska. I'm always being asked by, well, for lack of a better term, white people to come to various gatherings and tell stories. I get the feeling that they already have a certain type of story in mind, and the feeling is confirmed whenever I begin to tell what I perceive to be some kind of real story about Indian people. It ends up they want a creation story, or a trickster story, a story, in short, that mirrors their own culture back at them and makes them feel good, uncomplicated. It's not that these traditional stories are inherently bland and apolitical, quite the opposite. They originated in a genre that was strongly nationalistic in their tribal contexts, but they often get presented as kiddie stories. I used to go about telling these stories, but now I'm wondering who I am to yell them, and about the ways I get used to doing this, as well as the possible abuse to the Indian community. Maybe teachers and students should hear some other kind of story. What about this story, for instance? Here in Omaha, 50% of the Indian kids drop out of high school, 80% in Lincoln, more at the res. Or what about the fact that the average life expectancy is around 47 on the 3 reses in Nebraska, and the average income is about $6,000 a year for an entire family? But then again, they also need to hear the ways in which these tribes are surviving, healthy, culturally intact, spiritually in tune, politically sophisticated and evolving, bringing Indian realities into the 21st century. Rather than coyote stories, I'd just as soon tell them about Uncle Sonny Boy, who got drunk and bit off my Uncle Gould Coachman's ear during a poker game. Or another time, when a tornado came to Haskell, Oklahoma, and my grandma was plumb worn out from chopping cotton, and my granddad told her, "You can sit on your ass and get blowed away, but I'm taking the kids to the cellar." And so many more, most of which are painful. A whole of other things I could tell these people if they really wanted to hear Indian stories. And then I'm ambivalent about all of that too, because what if I leave my audience with the predominant impression of dysfunctionalism wrought by colonialism, rather than the incredibly sane, healthy, and spiritual ways my kin have survived? Storytelling, it now seems to me, is a vast terrain with many possibilities of getting lost, as well as for finding one's way, and not enough folks talking about better maps that represent the real territory in question. We now come to that time in our service when we pause to consider what is deepest in our hearts and most profoundly on our minds, or the work of our hands in the days that have transpired and in the days to come. Joys and sorrows which touch us deeply and are given another measure of meaning because we can share them in the midst of a company that claims us as co-journeyers. Those of you who have a joy or sorrow to share this morning are invited to form lines on either side of the sanctuary. How very white. Let's form lines on either side of the sanctuary and come in turn to the microphone, telling us first who you are, so that using our audio enhancement devices, for those using, always speak into the microphone. Okay, I got lost trying to read this. We're going back till I get there. Those of you who have a joy or sorrow to share this morning are invited to form lines on either side of the sanctuary and come in turn to the microphone. Which one's working? The one down there, okay. Telling us first who you are, so that those using our auditory enhancement devices might also participate in this important ritual. Plus, it allows those on Zoom and Facebook to hear what you're saying. And then light a candle if you so desire. If you would like me to read your joy or sorrow aloud, please bring it with you on an index card from the pew. If you are joining us online this morning and have a joy or a sorrow to share, please put that in the chat, preceded by please read, or put lots of emojis on it so we can find it, so that it can be found quickly, and we will share it during this time. There are many folks who would like to share joys and sorrows. Who are they, and would you like to come up now?
Test, 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 test. Here I am. Hi, my name is Paul, and the 16th, which is probably next week, but celebrating, my brother was killed on October 16th, 1969. And it's you know, I've said this before, like a lot of times it's just sibling rivalry that goes on, but, you know, it's sad that he's gone, and we're just expressing the loss.
Morning, I'm Kim. My dear friend Anisha Dargan passed away last Monday. She has been at our church many times. She came for the music and for the solace and the solitude and the joy of seeing her daughters dance. And she has 4 daughters, and several of them were in the youth group. I miss her. She had a lot of health issues, but she was gone too soon. She was only 46. And every fall we get together in my backyard and we make apple pies in my neighborhood, and she used to join us, and she loved to eat, so it was such a joy for her to be able to see us share this tradition.
Good morning, y'all. Christopher Panaya. I've been here years ago. Rebecca Ziegler and I returned from our new home in Florida. Kind of ironic. We think of Massachusetts as being one of the lands we conquered from the Nipmuc and other tribes. In Florida, they did that even before we did up here when the Pilgrims first came to Provincetown. It's interesting that we're talking about Native Americans because, in fact, I was just telling Matthew about our trip to the Great Smoky Mountains this summer, where we stayed in a town called Cherokee, which is a Native reservation. There are Native Americans there, mostly Cherokee, other tribes. It was kind of surreal because many of the signs in the town are written in Cherokee. This is a very stylized language, not similar to European or Asian languages. You get a sense of who we took this land from when you see some of their culture in the surroundings that you're in. We don't get that anywhere else. If you've been to Oklahoma, a lot of places. And to me, that was a little saddening. It was nice to be among friendly folks, other tourists, whatever. But it's a little, do I feel guilty? A little bit, yeah. So, but thank you for welcoming us back.
Hi, I'm Laura. Yesterday, my grandmother's yard sale, one of my aunts accidentally bought a landline telephone that only had Chinese directions. It would be funny unless my married into uncle, when an Asian man came to look at the yard sale, my said uncle pushed that telephone in front of him. When we had our last grandmother's birthday and the cake had lots of colors, another one of my white uncles said, maybe we should be singing Jamaican because it looks like a Jamaican cake. When a said family member found out my daughter was pregnant, the first thing she asked is it going to be black? When she asked a second time if my grandson was going to be black, I told her he was going to be purple. I could probably go on with my entitled white family, very close-minded, whom I love. But I'm going to say how much I love this community, that I could raise my daughter and soon-to-be grandson, that they could care less about the damn phone, about what color Mason could have been, or anything like that. Because I am breaking that white cycle in my family. And hopefully one day I can still hold my composure and not tell any of them off.
Morning. In more technology news, phone technology news, some of my accounts have been hacked, and I have no idea how it occurred. There are some people, one or more people here that apparently had some similar situations, and it could have happened. However, I feel like my reputation is tainted based on everything that's occurred, because now I'm attempting to contact every one of my thousands of contacts. And I asked Verizon, so how can I do this as a blanket thing? And they said, there's no way to do that. And maybe it's not even a good thing, because if I contact more than one, so I'm contacting my thousands of contacts one at a time, in addition to changing all the passwords. But I remember when I was in college, and I had someone steal my stereo, and how I felt about humanity at that moment. I love most of humanity. I love a lot of you here, but I feel like being hacked makes me feel powerless and less than. So for me personally, it's a painful experience. I have had some people here, and a lot of my friends, and here's the silver lining. I've had a lot of friends say they thought that I was hacked, and frankly, I've heard from some people I haven't heard from in 5 years. So I guess that's the silver lining. So there always is one.
Hi, my name is Diane Mann. I got to see the best movie I ever saw this week. Yay. You might wonder what it is. So my daughter's husband could not make it to her second ultrasound on Friday, so I got to go. I'm here to report that Harper Olivia has a full spine, head, all appendages with fingers and toes, and we are looking forward to it, and it was very fun. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is David Macheski. My sorrow, and there's a joy contained in it, that my 73-year-old mother was, she lives in Iowa, so I haven't physically seen her in quite a while because of COVID. She unexpectedly became homeless because of her problems with her living partner this past week. It was very just developed in the last couple of weeks situation. But the joy is she was able to work out a situation with my half-sister, which was not an iron-free proposition to live with her temporarily. So I'm grateful. Thank you.
Anyone online? Part of that's my fault. I usually do Facebook for everybody, and I'm not there, I'm here. So I hold in my heart all of those who are unable or don't wish to actually speak out loud their joy or sorrow. Know that we are with you wherever you are in your journey. I also want to introduce my sister, because I'm evil that way. This is my sister Melinda. She's been singing with us. She goes to the Groton Church, and she's come to be here and support me and also to sing. So let us be in the spirit of prayer. Great Spirit, we ask you to be with our community. Help us as we go through difficult times. Hold us in our grief, in our worry, in our fear. Help us to survive, to thrive, and help us to hear one another when we do hard work. Help us to love those who disagree with us, and help us to love ourselves when we disagree with ourselves. Help us. It is important work. We are grateful. Aho. Amen. Blessed be. Ashe. That's what I was about to do. I was waiting until everybody got up here. Okay. So now we come to the time in our service. We pause once again in our service for another kind of offering, one that reflects the values and principles we hold dear, that which is symbolic of our own efforts and capacities, a financial offering to continue the mission and ministries of this congregation. I invite you to participate in our offering as the plate comes before you, and give as it makes you feel good, and then give a little more. For those newest among us, please consider this service our gift to you. Do not feel obligated to contribute financially at this time. Wait until you feel it. For those joining us online, you are welcome to participate in our offering by either texting 508-232-5331, that's 508-232-5331, or by visiting www.uucworcester.org www.ccc.org/donate and following the instructions given there. At this time, the morning offering will be received. Because I am far enough away from you, I'm going to actually take my mask off to speak to you so you can actually hear me. Upon doing that, you'll see that there are Band-Aids on my face. I have very white skin. Have you ever noticed? Well, very white skin and sunshine don't always work together. And I had some spots on my face. And even though it is painful to my white skin, I had to know what it was. So I had biopsies done, which I don't know the answer to, which leaves me uncomfortable. But to not know is dangerous. And when I found out I was going to have Band-Aids on my face for the one service I do for a whole year, the dermatologist said, "Well, can you work it in?" That was me working it in. I did not know so much about anything, I think. I knew a lot of things that weren't true. I knew a lot of things that I thought were true. One thing that I did know, that I had learned from my family, was that I wanted to save the world. There was a joke when I was applying to college to get the file out. Apparently, all the things, save the whales, save the sea, save the trees, save. I always would take those, and I wanted to do them, so Mom would put them in a file for me. And I had this really big Save the World file. I had no idea. When I was young, I lived in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, went to Tulsa Public Schools, learned what I was supposed to learn in Tulsa Public Schools. I knew nothing about the Trail of Tears. I knew nothing about the Tulsa race riots. I knew nothing except that I wasn't supposed to step in somebody's yard because they were black and that would poison me. That was the world I grew up in, and it needed to be repaired. I remember bits and pieces from my childhood that were wonderful. But I also remember feeling like something wasn't right all the time, that there was something that we just I never quite understood what was going on. It seemed like the truth would change every day. It was really hard to know what was going on because it didn't stay that way. And I think that is what led me to have my file of Save the World. That is who I thought I was. Then, when I was 13, my parents got divorced. My mother took us up north, and I got to live in a place in which there was a different point of view. I got to experience life from my privileged, very privileged white life. I got to experience being looked down upon because I had a Southern accent. I got looked down upon because I wasn't born there. And I started to feel other in a different way. The seed was planted at that time. I looked back on some of these things when I was preparing this service, and I realized over and over again, one of the things that kept happening in my life is the rug would be pulled out from underneath me, and I didn't see it coming. And I would have to find my way to stand again. The same year of my parents' divorce was the year they began busing the Indians into the public schools. That year was very traumatic. I learned that so much that I thought was true was not true about my parents and what they were presenting to us as their marriage. I learned that my siblings didn't trust me because I had a tendency to say what was on my mind without thinking. They called it I had no tact. But really, honestly, it was me trying to figure out what was going on. And I also learned that for some reason it wasn't okay to be an Indian, even though my house was full of books about Indians. My father had taught me some Cherokee words. He was starting up his practice as an expert in Indian law. We used to go to Gilcrease Museum, and his idea of a fun vacation was a drive out to Indian mounds. I remember that. And that all came from my father. My mother didn't say much. She ran Girl Scout meetings, lots of Girl Scout meetings where we learned to light fires, where we learned to cut a chicken up, where we learned how to live in nature, where we learned to be part of nature. And we learned to dance. We danced in public school. I thought the dance was a folk dance. I now know differently. But all those things brought me to who I was becoming. And in high school, up in the north, where things were different, I started to meet people that were different from me that I had been prevented from meeting when I lived in Oklahoma. My first boyfriend was a black man. He was the only black student in the entire school. And he had one friend who was a Cuban American, and he was my other boyfriend. I was drawn to different because I felt so different and I wanted to know more. I thought that's what that was. But I learned so much more. I learned when I went to New York with my boyfriend. Well, I went to New York and then I met my boyfriend there. I didn't go with him. I would not have done that. I saw my first high-rise full of people of all one color living in a different way. I had never actually gotten to meet anyone of color other than the woman who took care of me and was a second mother to me, Arlivia, who wears the face of God to me to this day. I got to see a different world, and as my world opened up, and that part of me that wanted to save the world and didn't understand what was going on became center to who I was. At that time, I was still a Southern Baptist, but I had no church to go to, so I kind of disappeared into television and books and Star Trek and anything that would help me. Then my grandma Nellie, my mother's mother, after having been taking care of her mother in her household, my whole memory of life, when she died, my grandmother came up to live with us. And our family was my grandmother, my mother, and myself, and my brother, because my sister had gone to college. And that group of people became my identity. And I learned from my grandmother about gardening. I learned about making pickles. I learned about how to make fried chicken. I learned the family recipes. But I also was told by her that black people had thicker skulls, and so I shouldn't hit my boyfriend in the head. I shouldn't have hit anybody. But violence was a part of our lives. And so my favorite human, my grandma Nellie, started to have some troubling places in my worldview. But I still loved her, even though I disagreed with her. And I didn't have enough guts at that time to disagree with her. I was silent. I regret that. Then I went to college. Now, I had the privilege of going to college, even though I was the third child of a single parent who was working 5 jobs. I went from someone of great power in Oklahoma to someone of low economic status. My mother was the cook, the kitchen cook at a boarding school. But she lived bigger than that. She always projected this sense of power, even though right and left, it was taken away from her. My grandmother told me I had too much ambition, that it was going to get me in trouble. I was being told right and left different stories. Be strong, but do what you're supposed to do. Speak up, but don't make waves. It was a confusing place to be. So when I went to college, and I met a bunch of people who were also economically in my category, who couldn't go out to dinner all the time and would have to scrounge to have pizza, I made my best friends. And when you know, that ended up being the Black Student Alliance. I was actually a member of the Black Student Alliance with this skin. And I didn't know that I was an Indian. I worked in the theater with them, I became friends with them, and I learned so much more that I took every Black Studies class that was available and began what I did not yet know was my anti-racism journey. At that point, I was unchurched. That was a different sermon. I've given that a lot of time and why I do campus ministry. But one of the things that came of that is I met my first Unitarian Universalist people. And they planted a seed. So when I met my Jewish husband, fell in love, and decided to be a shiksa, once again, I'm on the outside. I'm not Jewish, but I'm not Christian. I was playing with feminism in a lot of ways. That was a big part of my identity, and I had found joy in Wicca, but it still wasn't right. I went to a service at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Northborough, where a young woman was being dedicated on June 21st, the summer solstice, and her name was Melinda. I knew I was in the right place. I'd always been safe with my sister, so I stayed. I took it as a sign from the Great Spirit. Here was a pagan congregation dedicating a little girl with my sister's name. This would be a good place for me to find out what was going on. Well, one of the ministers there, actually the one I thought was the minister, was Rose Eddington. And her husband is the Reverend Mel Hoover. Mel Hoover was the person at the UUA who at that time was leading the anti-racism initiative called Journey Towards Wholeness. And they brought me in. Rose was helping me become more of a Unitarian Universalist, teaching me and mentoring me, and I went to every Journey Towards Wholeness event I could go to and became friends with Mel, and I felt like I was in the right place to explore all this. Here I could look at it and find out what I was doing wrong, and I would be safe. Then a strange thing happened. One more time, the rug is pulled out from underneath me. My dear Grandma Nellie died. And I had a house with an empty basement. It's not empty anymore, sorry, Bruce. I got all of her papers and all of her things. I became the family historian in my generation. So I had all these things in my house. And my brother, now married for his second time, had a son who had run off when he was 15 with a girl, and they had had a baby. And apparently they'd gotten married in the Cherokee Nation because she was a Cherokee. And they could get married that way. They had this baby, and then because he was so young, they didn't live together anymore. But the baby was there, and her name was Felicity. And I got to hold Felicity when she was just a few days old, and it was amazing. Well, a tornado came and unfortunately killed Felicity's mother. And Felicity, because she was a member of the Cherokee Nation through her mother, was given to her aunt, who had a very serious drug problem. Not an unusual event in Oklahoma, in the Cherokee Nation. And she was using the money that was for Felicity to buy drugs. And Felicity was hungry. And my nephew wanted to get custody. But the only way he could get custody of his own daughter was to prove that he was a Native American, a person of Cherokee blood. So I got a phone call from my sister-in-law, my brother's first wife, saying, "We've heard that you've got an Indian ancestor. We've heard about this." And it was kind of one of those things that you sort of heard, but nobody really paid attention to because you kind of weren't supposed to. And I said, okay, I will look and see if I can find out the lineage of my mother's family. And I did. And I found out the big secret. In 1940, when my mother was 8 years old, she lived in a house with her mother, her father, and her paternal grandmother. Her paternal grandmother's name was Alice. Alice Wilson, Sarah Alice Wilson, lots of names, but the same person. And when the people came by for the census, they asked what race my mother was. And Alice insisted that she was white. But Alice was not white. Alice was colored, which was code for Indian. So we looked into Alice's background for Felicity, and we hunted it down, and we found that sure enough, she was probably, and because truth is such a malleable thing in our history, probably the daughter of James Wilson, who may or may not be on the Dawes rolls. Dawes rolls is how you get to be part of the Cherokee Nation. A lot of people are Cherokee and did not sign up on the Dawes rolls. Why would you go to the people who have taken you from where you were, forced you off your land, sent you on a death march, and tried to kill you, that you are going to sign up so they can find you? That's why my mother was white, to avoid the Indian schools. We've heard a lot about what happened in those Indian schools. I understand why she did it now. But the legacy of that is that nobody knows the truth. And finding the truth has been a lifetime adventure. And luckily for me, and for Felicity, we found that piece of truth. Felicity was able to move in with her father, and she grew better. She had a chance to recover from what was a very abusive relationship with her aunt. And Jesse did the work to find out how we could be members of the Cherokee Nation, but never submitted the paperwork. So, okay, why? We'll never know. He did the work. He told us it was there, but he can't produce it to us now. That is typical for most people of our recovering generation, of those of us who are trying to find out our history when it was denied and obliterated and removed. People burned their birth certificates if they had them. People erased every chance they had to avoid being an Indian. If you were an Indian, you could be arrested. If you were dancing, you were arrested. I always wondered why we weren't allowed to dance. That seems strange to me, since it's in the Bible. They'd said it was because we were Southern Baptists, but no, it's because we were Indians. Can't dance. If you know me, that's hell. We weren't allowed to speak our language. If you spoke the Cherokee language, you could be hung. You could be killed. Your families could be killed. You would have everything taken away. So you didn't do it. So it wasn't just about taking the Indians off the land and sending them out. It was making them disappear. We're still here. We just don't know it. So I took all this new knowledge with me to General Assembly of the UUA. And I was pretty blown away by all this and still feeling a little shaky. And it was the year that they were beginning DRUM, which is Diverse Radical Unitarian Universalist something ministries. And it was multicultural ministries. And at the same time, they were trying to create a separate group for white folks that wanted to work on anti-racism. And I didn't know where to go. And I ran into a wonderful man, Reverend Joseph Santos Lyons, who happened to be doing the campus ministry stuff, which is how I met him. And I told him, and he said, "You need to go to DRUM because you already know how to be white." When I went to DRUM, I met other mixed bloods. I found out that the feelings that I was having about not knowing who I was and not feeling right about being who I was, all the ambivalent feelings like, am I okay to claim this identity? I didn't know about it. I know very little about being a Cherokee. Can I claim this? And the regret that I felt that on my other side of my family, we were actively part of making the Indians go away. We were on both sides of every war in our genome. I found that help in finding my way through the Unitarian Universalist workshops presented by DRUM. And then, with some help from that crew, they encouraged me to go to Tulsa, back to Tulsa, for a workshop on decolonization and anti-racism. It is there where I met the Reverend Gary McAlpin, who grew up with red hair and a Cherokee speaker grandfather who went to stomp dances and knew about his Cherokee heritage, but also had as white a skin as me and was Scotch-Irish just like me. And his children looked like me. And I understood that this is kind of who I am. And for the first time, I stood up and I said, "You just invisibled me," when someone spoke as if there were no Indians in the room. Gary asked me to join him and come meet the nation with him at a stomp dance. It was the invitation of a lifetime. And I was so excited and terrified. And I went with Gary to the stomp dance, and I sat at a table eating all this weird food that I grew up eating. This salad made of marshmallows and pineapple and orange and coconut, and we called it ambrosia or something. And then this white salad, which was made with black walnuts and marshmallows, and fried chicken and barbecue and banana pudding. These things that are just, they were my home cooking. These are the things I grew up on, and wouldn't you know, that's what they eat at the stomp dance. I started to feel at home. I sat at a table and we all ate in total silence together. And it was one of the most peaceful and powerful moments I'd ever experienced. Silence is hard to come by in New England. It's even harder to come by in New York City. It is really hard to come by when your heart is bursting with questions. But I stayed silent and I listened. And when the stomp dance actually happened, I was sitting in a chair next to his daughter and his son, his second son, who were going to sleep there. I didn't know that a stomp dance went all night. Apparently it goes from dusk to dawn, and then some. Sometimes it goes for 2 days. Luckily, Gary also had to be back for the workshop, so I got to go home. But before we went, I had been sitting there for easily 2 hours, just watching the dance, fascinated, listening to the chanting, watching people dance around the fire in a dance I had learned as a folk dance in public school. My biggest regret is that Gary asked me to join the dance, and I was too terrified that I would fall into the fire that I did not do it. We drove back. I spent the whole night that was left talking with other people who were at that workshop and started to put things back together in my life, and I felt better. And the next day, I went and had dinner with my father, at which point I asked him, I told him that I had found proof that we were Native American. And he looked at our barbecue with such disgust. I realized why my mother would never have said she was an Indian with him. Things were never easy with my dad. They were really hard after that, and I didn't go back for a very long time, except for funerals. But as I kept working this, I also began to find out that my white skin was a trigger to some of my beloved colleagues. That when I walked in the room, I was still a white person. And I still am a white person. But I'm also an Indian. And I found a place in Unitarian Universalism and anti-racism work to be both. I learned more than I ever wanted to know. More than I ever wanted to know about our history. And thanks to going to every Indian reservation I could find next to every General Assembly with my drum colleagues and my Indigenous community, who are mostly mixed bloods and mostly undocumented like myself, we're doing the work and we're finding a way to be whole, not to forgive, but to understand why things happened. In the process of doing this, I have forever lost Columbus Day. I now know that Columbus was a slaver, that he was not trading and finding new land. He was finding new sources of slaves, and he killed and took almost the entirety of the indigenous people in Hispaniola, the Taínos. That his works were all about, he had been a slaver with the Portuguese, with Portugal for years, more than a decade before he got on that Santa Maria and the 3 ships that got lost and stumbled on Hispaniola. I am happy to give up Columbus Day. Now that I know what he was about and what we lost, I celebrate Indigenous Day and encourage everyone else to. Thanksgiving was harder for me to give up. But I found, because this is a generational problem, it's going to take generations to recover. And my daughter, while she was in college, was exploring Native American religions at Mount Holyoke. And I found in one of her textbooks a thing about Columbus Day, but in the back it also talks about Thanksgiving. I had bought in, and still did, that Thanksgiving was the one day the Indians and the Pilgrims got together and they did actually get along. How it happened, I'm still, okay. History is written by the winners, so okay, it's gonna be whitewashed. But I did not know that actually Thanksgiving Day was first proclaimed by the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1637 to commemorate the massacre of 700 Native people who had gathered for a green corn dance. The Native people were herded into a large building and burned alive, and escapees were shot. William Bradford, the governor of Plymouth Colony, described his reaction to the mass slaughter. This is the guy we're talking about who said that he was going to start Thanksgiving, right? It was a fearful sight to see the Indians thus frying in fire and the streams of blood quenching the same. And horrible was the stink and scent thereof. But the victory seemed a sweet sacrifice, and the settlers gave the praise thereof to God, who had wrought so wonderfully for them. So for my Thanksgiving, I thank the turkey. I thank the people that raise the food, and I make lots of pie. I do not celebrate the first meal of the natives and the settlers who went on land that had been prepared but for them by decimating the people that were there. One of the biggest learnings I have had is that while the Indians were the first slaves, they were part of a network. And what happened is that they then were surpassed by imported slaves from Africa, also brought against their will because they knew their way around America. They were enslaved in Europe, taken away. While our racism is rampant and killing people, the genocides continue. I can hide my Native history. I can hide. I learned how to do that in the cradle. I choose not to hide anymore because by hiding, I let the genocide succeed. But I also have a privilege that my African descent colleagues, my people of color friends, do not have. they can't hide. And so they become the targets. It is my task, and I hope one that you will join me on, to try and eliminate the true and complete reason, the deep down cancer of our society, of colonization. And we need to decenter our whiteness because our whiteness is genocidal. We need to love each other and find a new way. I have been saved over and over by the UUA's work on anti-racism, 3 different forms of it now. And I wholeheartedly embrace it, and I ask you to join me as we continue to try dismantle this horrible way that our country has been inherited. I'm not saying any of you did it. I didn't do it either. But it's there, and we're the only ones that can help it and fix it. So please, be brave, be whole, and join us in this work. May it be so. Aho. Barry Brigham, are you here? I wanted to ask you to come because the next song, I don't ever want to be asked to dance and not dance again. Let it be a dance we do. Okay, I'm breathless. Thank you for dancing with me. May life bring you joy, wonderful surprises. May you always feel supported. May you know that you are not in this alone, that it's not your fault. It's not mine either, but we can fix it. One step at a time, one generation at a time, one truth at a time. Go in peace. Sorry, I forgot to put that back on. Everybody wash your hands. Coffee hour is outside.